Well, Rich, just over my shoulder, Colin Kaepernick is warming up with his teammates on the field, but a little bit later tonight, about 100 feet to my right on the sideline, he is expected to kneel once again and protest to what he says are social injustices to African Americans.
And people, of course, think you're the big sports star, so you're immune to any social issues. Unfortunately, you just had an incident. Somebody spray paints the N-word across the gate of your house in Los Angeles. This is where you live in the summer. Yeah. This is where your children sleep. What did it feel like to you?
Surprising, no. Because I still understand how race plays a huge part in America. And for me to be sitting here on the eve of the finals, one of the biggest sporting events in the world, and I have to answer questions about racism, it just lets me know that it's still here, and we should all know that. And if it takes for someone to spray paint my gate and use that derogatory term, that hate on my family, to shed a light on what the real issue is in the world, then so be it.
I believe that us honoring our flag and our anthem is part of what binds us together as a nation. And I think that for me, for my family, for those who work in the White House, we recognize what it means to us, but also what it means to the men and women who are fighting on our behalf. But I'm also always trying to remind folks that we respect people's rights to have a different opinion and to make different decisions about how they want to express their concerns. And the test of our fidelity to our Constitution, to freedom of speech, to our Bill of Rights, is not when it's easy, but when it's hard.
Look, we need to ask ourselves honest questions in this country, and especially when it comes to how we're going to have conversations about race. The riots break out in Ferguson, and part of the dialogue is that is not the way to protest. You do not, destroy communities because you're upset. NBA players wear T-shirts during warm-ups, and the conversation is, well, that's not how you do it. You don't, use your body as signage to get your point across. Okay. Colin Kaepernick quietly kneels during the national anthem. Well, that's not the way you protest. That's not how we handle the issue. Okay. Then how do we handle the issue? Right. I mean, and those are conversations that we need to have as a country, especially when it comes related to sports. That if the individual wants to, they should be allowed to express themselves, no matter what their opinions are. I mean, again, like, this goes both ways, right? Because it should be open dialogue, hearing both sides. But I think the question is, like, if we can do something, should we do something? And I stand on the side of yes when it comes to that. We're talking about O.J. Simpson. You're talking about a lot, right? And sports becomes a great vehicle to sort of have that conversation. I was a sophomore, junior in high school I was a senior. I was a senior in high school when that trial starts. I was a freshman in college when the verdict comes out. The fascinating thing is that it's an interesting shift. It's a shift from, I think the shift in the conversation is that it shows you what your level of wealth can do inside of a courtroom. And that at some point your level of wealth changes the conversation from race to wealth in sort of the OJ mindset. And OJ is a very interesting character in terms of where he fits in sort of his generation of African American athletes. His contemporaries were much more of a civil rights voice than he was. So there's a lot to unpack when you talk about OJ. I do think discussing Michael Jordan and race is a really interesting thing. There was a poster that came out, and you guys can probably find it. It's a black and white poster, and it's a profile picture of Jordan and Muhammad Ali. And above it, it says, "The greatest." And while both individuals are great and really sort of the icons of their respective sports with boxing and basketball, Michael Jordan's an interesting level superstar. Michael Jordan doesn't have conversations about race. Michael Jordan doesn't have conversations about race. Derek Jeter doesn't have conversations about race. There's this group of athletes from that, mid to late 90s onto the early 2000s that, essentially because of their image or their product or whatever, I felt shied away from that. And so when you put Michael Jordan and Muhammad Ali together, Muhammad Ali was willing to sacrifice his career for what he believed in terms of racially what's going on in the country or what was right or wrong. He took political stance. And we don't have that with Michael Jordan. And I think there's a gap of time as sports grows, as outside influence, Nike money, things of that comes into play.
I did sports as a kid. I did pretty much every sport. I did soccer, I did baseball, basketball. But then I got into running, so then I've been running for since 4th grade, and that's the sport I've continued to do.
Okay. Can sports have the potential to change racism?
Yeah, I think sports can change racism, In a lot of sports, some sports are more heavily dominated with one race than another. For running, I would say it's more heavily dominated with white people. That's just how it is. But we can get more people to do it, and then I think it could change racism.
Okay. Is it possible that sports can make racism worse?
I also think yes, it could, because if somebody says something wrong, it could make other people not like that sport just because some person said something wrong, and it just affects how people think about the sport.
How has racism affected us as a society?
Well, back then it was a little different, but now, people just, they could say something wrong when they shouldn't, and it just caused a lot of outbursts, and just people say stuff that they shouldn't, and it just, because media has affected racism, people just say stuff and they don't really think about it, so I think that people just need to check twice of what they put out there.
I just find it stupid that people are hating on people who stand up in what they believe in, because it's freaking dumb. Okay, I feel like sports do have a big impact on racism because some coaches don't let their teammates express themselves, and I honestly think it's the news' fault, because the news would only show people what they want to hear and what they want to see, but in reality there's a lot of racism happening with the police and stuff, and in sports it's also worse, because I was watching this one TV show where they gave this guy who was on a famous track person community service because of his record and all of this, and I was just but if it was a black person, he would have went to jail for his crime.